I want to tell you a story. And honestly, it's my story. It's how I became somebody who believes in all this crazy Christian stuff. I mean, to be fair, that's not how actually I would word it in real life. The way I would say it is, this is the story of how I became somebody who would call themselves a follower of Jesus, somebody who puts the teachings of Jesus into practice in their life. And I want to tell you that story because it's the day after Easter. And Easter is this religious Christian holiday that supposedly celebrates the day that Jesus had been killed and dead and buried, but was resurrected, came back to life, and then continued to teach and lead people and guide people until he mysteriously vanished, and the spread of his message of faith and hope and love spread all over the world from the first century all the way up until now. And I want to tell you about how I became a follower of Jesus. And before I do that, I want to tell you two things. Number one, I want to say that this is my story, and I don't expect you to necessarily always believe in every single detail or to say that that's the only way to see it, but I want to tell you my story and that this is how I experienced it, and I hope that you will trust me, that I don't have some kind of agenda here or crazy intention. If I have any agenda here, it's that I want you to hear my story clearly so that you would believe, so that you would know that there is hope, that there is life, we're not alone, and that there is a presence that is with us and for us and ahead of us. The second thing I want to say before I tell my story is that I am so thankful to be a part of a church like Christ Church of Flagstaff, and to all of you who give and support financially, locally, to your local church like CCOF, thank you. You know, you heard, if you attended our service digitally, you saw that because of us, we were able to give thousands of dollars to our local homeless mission, Sunshine Rescue Mission, and Hope Cottage in Dorsey Manor. And I'm just so thankful to be a part of a group of Christians, a group of followers of Jesus who take his teaching seriously and who don't just talk about what they believe and all sorts of kooky, weird prayer ritual things. I'm glad to be a part of a church that just puts the teachings of Jesus into action. And I want to say thank you to all of you who give and support CCOF. So having said those things, here's my story. When I was a teenager, I grew up Catholic, grew up going to Catholic church all my life. And my mom and dad raised me Catholic, and we got that from my grandma and grandpa, who, if you're watching this right now, grandma and grandpa, I love you because you planted the seed of faith in my life, and I never knew it for years. Thank you for the ways you always held your faith. But anyways, all that to say, as my parents raised me, I became very curious about that book. I asked myself one Easter, actually, it was Easter at the Catholic service, and I remember listening to the priest read out of a Bible. He was reading out of this thing, of the New Testament, and I remember thinking to myself, man, I've never read that book. How do I even know this is my religion? If this is my family's religion, what does the book say? I've never really read it. I could be a part of a crazy cult and I wouldn't know it, right? So I go home and I do what every good person does, is I grab a Bible and I open to page 1 and I read in the book of Genesis, and about 4 chapters in, I'm I'm falling asleep, you know what I mean? Absolutely insane, because I don't know who Melchizedek is and I don't understand these names, and how is that relevant to anything? So I put the book away and forgot about it. 1 year later, it's Easter again. This is why Easter is so important to me in my story, is that it was Easter again. I started picking up a Bible, and this time I grabbed a Bible that was different from the one I originally grabbed. See, I didn't know there was a difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament, that there's 2 parts of a Bible, that the Old Testament is literally the Jewish faith, the Jewish religion, and the New Testament is the Christian faith, or the story of Jesus, written by these 4 eyewitnesses who wrote a biography: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And as I read a Bible, I picked up the first one and it was an Old Testament. But when I picked up the second one, the one I had gotten at my first communion class, it was a New Testament. And I started not in the book of Genesis, but in the book called Matthew. And I started as a teenager reading these stories of Jesus, his teachings, his words, what he did, and I could not put the book down. It changed me, even as a teenager. And I would encourage any of you, those of you who would call yourselves a Christian or religious or even not, Don't take people's word for it. Read the words of Jesus yourself. Pick up a Bible and go find the New Testament. Go read anything in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I assure you, if you read just a few chapters in, you will be amazed at what Jesus actually said and what he actually taught. I found it so compelling, even as a young teenager. So I pick up this Bible, I read it, and I'm growing in my faith. Now, I start taking my faith even more seriously. And it was at this time that my family, my mom and dad, gone through a terrible divorce, and things were not well. And I was living with my dad, and my dad was a hoarder. My dad did not keep our house well, and we were not, I got to be honest, it was not a great place to live, and he was not emotionally healthy anymore. And on top of that, my mom had moved into an apartment, and it wasn't my favorite place to be, and she knows that. And my mom was dating some people, and my mom and I just started to grow more distant because I didn't like her lifestyle. There were things she was doing that I didn't approve of, and I, being this newfound, super excited Christian guy, started to try to tell her, hey, Mom, you should read this book. You should, look into this. And it just began to put us at odds. And meanwhile, my dad is at home becoming more unstable, more weird, more bitter, and more angry. And I was feeling less and less like I belonged at my house. And one night I was on the phone with my mom. Do you remember telephones? Do you remember how there was a phone with a cord in it and you'd have to hang it up? It was the best. You could really communicate that you were angry when you had to slam a phone. It was a wonderful time in history. Anyway, so I had this phone in the kitchen with a cord on it, and I had to stand in the kitchen to use it because it had a cord, And I'm listening and talking to my mom, and we're in this kind of disagreement, and we're kind of starting to get upset with each other, and my mom starts crying. And I can't tell you how it feels to be a young man and to make your mom cry because of what you believe. It's a weird feeling, and I didn't feel good. And then out of nowhere, her boyfriend at the time grabs the phone and he says to me on the phone, you call us back when you choose to be a real Christian, and says a bunch of things that I don't want to repeat and hangs up on me. Now at this time I felt horrible because I thought maybe there's something wrong with me. What am I doing wrong? I'm trying to grow in my faith and stand up for what I think is good and right. And it's putting a wedge between Mom and my life with her. And then I turn around. And just when I thought, man, I really could use my dad's love and support right now. If he were there for me to just say, I'm so sorry things are going poorly for you. How can I encourage you? No, my dad this whole time had picked up the other line of the phone and had been listening in on it. And he came up to me and he wanted to give me a high five and be like, isn't it great that you and your mom are parting ways? Good riddance. Let her live her crazy life. You don't need to do all that. And my dad wanted to high five me and celebrate that this was going bad between my mom and I. I can't tell you how much that hurt me. I just felt at that moment lost. And I didn't have anyone to turn to. My mom and dad were all I had. I didn't have any siblings. And my mom and dad were just everything to me. And then all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, I felt like they became different people and I didn't know where to turn. And so my dad wanting me to high five him, I just kind of scowled at him. I gave him a look, you know what I mean? Just a look. And I went away, I went to my bedroom, and then I shut the door. And I just started to cry. I'll be completely honest with you. I was hopeless. I was lost. I started to cry, and I did what every one of us does when we're in trouble. I found a Bible, and I opened it somewhere, and I was like, you know what I mean? Where you close your eyes, and you hope to God to hear something meaningful. And wouldn't you know it, the very first place I landed, I'm crying, I'm upset, and I don't know what to do. I feel like my whole life, my family, everything has changed. I feel alone and abandoned. And I swear to you that this is exactly what my eyes saw. The very first thing my eyes saw as I pointed and I looked down, and it was Psalm 27, verse 10. And it says this, though your father and mother forsake you, the Lord will take you in. Even though your father and mother forsake you, the Lord will take you in. Psalm 27:10. When I read that in that old book, I knew there was a presence that was with me. I knew that Jesus was really there. That I, for the first time in my life, felt like God spoke to me. Have you ever felt like God has spoken to you? I know you always sound crazy when you say it, right? Like if you ever tell somebody, I think God talked to me, we all kind of look at them like, you should update your prescription, you know? But the truth is, that was the first time in my life I felt like God literally gave me words and spoke to me. And he told me, even if your father and mother forsake you, I will never leave you. I will take you in. When I heard that, it changed my life. I completely, radically started following Jesus because I knew then he was alive. He was real. He was with me. He was for me. And he clearly was ahead of me, taking me somewhere better. And I share this with you today because it's the day after Easter. And some of us just see Easter as another Christian holiday with weird things. And did Jesus really rise from the dead? And a lot of people want to point you to a bunch of proofs and science and archaeology. And listen, that data is there. And if you are listening to this, please send me a message. Put a DM or whatever you want to do. Send me a text. I don't care. I'd love to send you those resources about that kind of data, about the resurrection of Jesus. But here's the truth. Most of us believe in Jesus, not because the math adds up. Most of us follow Jesus because of an experience we've had with him and his resurrected presence in our life. And that's my story. I know that he exists and that he is alive, not just because the math adds up, and it does, but it's because I know that he spoke to me that night. When at a time in my life when I could not have been more lost. I could not have felt more alone. It was as if I had heard the voice of God. I heard something better. It was written on a page in black and white for me to see. And I invite you, wherever you are right now, I want to invite you to start talking to God again. No matter what you believe and who you are and what you think, that changed my life when I realized God was that close. He was that available. He was that real. And I don't care who you are, whether you've been a Christian forever or you've never, ever thought about it. I want to invite you to start talking to God like he's there, because he is. And I invite you to believe and to trust. And I want to encourage you that if you are connected at all to Christ Church of Flagstaff this weekend, Sunday at 10 a.m., our service will be posted, and it's going to be about this entire idea, which is, God, are you there? And this entire idea of what does it mean to talk to God and to hear back from God? What does it mean? Can God actually do that? What does it mean to know God like that, to have a conversational life with God and to know that you can hear from God? I want to walk you through, and our church wants to walk us through that idea of what it could mean, especially now more than ever when life feels even crazier than it was before only a few months ago. So I thank you. Thank you so much for hearing my story, and I hope that obviously it's my story, and I can only hope that it meant something to you. It'll never mean what it meant to me, but I hope that you'll have your own version of it. And I hope that you will trust me, that I'm not a crazy person. I'm not trying to sell you a weird prayer hanky or something stupid like that. I am trying to tell you that there is a presence, there is a God, there is a resurrected Christ who loves you, who is with you, who is for you and ahead of you. And I invite you to trust in that presence, even when it doesn't make sense, because in all the ways you could never imagine, that presence will meet you and will find you. Thanks for hearing my story, and I hope you'll stay connected to CCOF and follow along in this newly upcoming series and take this journey with us.